To talk about both of these is Fred Tecce. He's a former assistant U.S. attorney in the criminal division and now with McShay and Tecce. So you have experience with patent litigation, also criminal litigation. So we can talk about all of these matters here. Fred, let's start with Intel because that's just what Ian was talking about.
Yep.
Now, according to the allegations here, did Intel actually break the law? Is it going to be difficult to make this case?
I actually don't think it will be difficult, Julie, to show that they've broken the law. This is what they call a conduct case. And what they do is they pay these rebates. And the way it works is you're Intel and you go to the computer manufacturers and you say, look, if you buy all of your chips from me, I'll give you a $1 rebate for every one that you buy. So if you buy 1 million chips from me for all of your computers, I'll give you $1 million. Well, if you're a competitor and you want to get in and get some fraction of that, the computer manufacturer risks losing the $1 million rebates, and so you can't get any of the business. If you wanted to get 100,000 of those computers, the computer manufacturer is not going to give up $1 million rebate just to give you 100,000 computers or some fraction of it for $1 saving. So they also bullied them. They've paid IBM $130 million. So I got to tell you, as a former federal prosecutor and a guy who's done a bunch of antitrust cases, including these conduct cases, I think the government's case will be easier to prove than you think.
Well, Cuomo's out ahead of this, but we already had European authorities, we already had Asian regulators also accusing Intel of similar infractions. Where's the FTC in all of this?
Well, the FTC, as I understand it, is looking at these things. And you know, Julie, nature abhors a vacuum. And so not only will the Attorney General's office bring these cases, and the FTC may bring a case, but what follows along behind these cases are the private antitrust suits that get brought as class action lawsuits by everyone who bought a computer alleging that they paid too much because Intel was able to strong-arm the computer manufacturers. So I got news for you. The storm begins today.
And other states as well, not just New York?
Absolutely. Other states may follow it on. You know, we saw it years ago in the antitrust case that had been brought against Microsoft. Other states followed. In that case, I think DOJ led the charge, but you will see other states, and you'll see the private suits come along too, because it's the Lawyers Fair Employment Act.
What about the AMD case, though? Because that's been outstanding, and it hasn't been resolved. If this is such an easy case to make, why hasn't AMD made it?
Well, because you know what? I mean, it's like, you know what these cases are like. They chop down every tree in the Pacific Northwest, and they run through billions and billions of documents. And remember, too, I mean, AMD is a competitor. The key, the crux to an antitrust case is what's called an antitrust injury. You have to show harm to the consumer. Because if you're AMD and people like Intel just raise the price of chips, you know, you can raise your price with them and make money. What you have to show is harm to the consumer. So, you know, these big federal cases, they lumber along. I mean, I tell my clients this all the time. Litigation moves at a glacier's pace. I got to tell you, the State Attorney General's office of New York, if they didn't think there was anything here, would not have filed suit.
Fred, this is sounding pretty expensive for Intel.
Oh, get out your checkbook, boys, because it's going to be an army of lawyers, and they're going to be marching over the hills carrying their briefcases.
Speaking of an army of lawyers, we saw just that just a little while ago, the press conference from downtown here talking to us about the latest charges related to Galleon, related to insider trading.
Yep.
This sounds very involved here. How difficult is it to sort of ferret out this sort of case?
Well, I got to tell you, this case is actually, I think, easier to prove up than the antitrust case against Intel. I mean, Galleon is taking on water, and they are sinking fast. In this case, the government has been using what they call T3 wiretap, so you have recorded conversations. They've been using what they call data mining. They have computer transaction records. I mean, for the government to prove its case, and I tell people this all the time, you know, just because people erase things on their computers doesn't mean that you can't go back and get the information. You can try and do a million different things to your hard drive. That information will still be obtainable. So the government will go through this. And, you know, we heard you talking a little bit earlier about guys throwing away their cell phones and stuff like this. Irrespective of all of that, the data trail that gets left on these insider trading and these white-collar criminal cases is overwhelming, and the government will be able to put it together, put the dots down, and the jury will follow the dots to a conviction.